Next, I would like to introduce Robin McBride, the co-founder and president of McBride Sisters Wine Company, the largest Black-owned and largest all-women-founded wine company in the United States. That's amazing. I feel like I need to read that. Again. The largest Black-owned and largest all-women-founded wine company in the entire United States. Their mission is to transform the industry, lead by example. Oh, I don't need this mic. I'm like double mic'd here, right? I'm going to turn this. Okay. Their mission is to transform the industry, lead by example, and cultivate community, one delicious glass at a time. Please welcome Robin McBride to the stage. I get up and give you a hug. I'm sorry, Miles. You can sit right here. Yeah. Sorry, Miles. That was totally my fault. Okay. We can sit as close. We can sit on each other's laps if we want. We can do whatever we want. First off, I just want to say thank you so much. It is such an honor to have you here, and I have been a fan from afar for a long time of what you've built. And
well, thank you. Hello.
I think. Oh, here, take mine.
I'll take yours.
Okay.
Thank you
for having me. I'm super excited to be here. I've been on a crazy journey around the country lately, and I'm so glad that it worked out timing-wise. And of course, I'm a fan. So it's a pinch me moment. We are. That's okay. I like it. Okay. You have been on a busy journey, you said, but I feel like your life has been an incredible journey. You and your sister, Andrea McBride John, have one of the most remarkable origin stories I've ever heard. You two were only children, and you didn't know each other existed. You grew up here in California, and your sister grew up literally a world away in New Zealand. I wanted to know what changed in you when you found out you had a sister.
Oh, that's an interesting question. Everything. I think because I didn't grow up, for those who don't know the story, we're half sisters. So we have the same father and we have two different mothers. My sister's mother is originally from New Zealand, so she grew up in New Zealand. But growing up not knowing our father, growing up as an only child, it's kind of, your identity, I think, right? Is like, that's how I identify. Others have said they were an only child, right? And when I found out that I had a sister, suddenly it sort of changed my whole identity. When I was able to meet her, which was about a day or so later from when I found out that I had a sister, and seeing this beautiful, I was 25 at the time. So I was a full-grown adult, fully formed adult, and she was 16. But getting to meet her and also seeing the resemblance physically really just changed my perspective, being that I'm not alone as a child, in this world. I have a sister, I have a sibling, because neither one of us had any other, siblings at all to relate to, and suddenly felt that connection, with another human. And, we found out she grew up in New Zealand, I grew up in Monterey, completely different ends of the planet, but both very similar. And of course, that is what initiated our bond that eventually led us to wine. But I didn't feel alone anymore. I didn't feel like no one else understood my experience and the life that I had lived. And then when I met my sister, I had my partner in that.
Incredible. And I have to say, this happened before things like 23andMe. So it is a miracle that it happened.
Before Facebook and Google and all of the things. So it was definitely a miracle. And it actually took, I guess, all told, probably 3 or 4 years for our father's family to find both of us. Again, my sister was all the way in New Zealand, but they found her first. And then it took another 3 or so years to find me back here in the States. And so even when I learned about her, I received a letter, an old-fashioned letter that was handwritten in scratchy handwriting by our aunt, who's older. She's like 80 or something, in Alabama, but got the letter. And even then, I couldn't just Google to see who is this person and what does she look like. I knew nothing about her. I did not know what she looked like at all. And so when we arranged to meet each other, we didn't even know who we were looking for. I mean, it sounds so weird today because you can look at anybody now, but we didn't even know who we were looking for. And I was like, I don't even know. Do we look alike? Is she tall like me? Which is hilarious. If anybody's ever seen my sister, she's over 6 feet tall. I thought I was tall before I met my sister. Is she tall like me? Do we look alike? And we do. And yes.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I knew about you and your company. Well, I knew about your company before I knew your story.
And it just gives so much more meaning to the fact that the word sister is in the name of your company. I'm guessing there was no other option.
It's intentional, yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it really is for us. It's us coming together as family, as siblings, as sisters, finding new family, but also paying respects and homage to our family that we both each got to know through our union. And so it truly is about family. When we met each other and we started our company, which from the time that we met to the time we started our company together, I think was maybe 5 years or less. We figured out our destiny pretty quickly. But one of the first things that we did was we actually made our own family crest, which is what's on our labels now today. But it was like, well, what else do you do? You know, when you find a sibling and you have a whole new family, is you make yourself a family crest. But we wanted to do that to honor, you know, this family that we didn't know that we had and we never thought that we would have, and you know, are just so happy that we have you know, the business and the family and the community that we've built over these years. So we honor that with our own family crest. Why not?
Absolutely, why not? You used an interesting word. You said that you two sort of figured out or decided on your destiny. I wrote you two decided to go into business together. So business versus destiny, that's a little different. You're a poet. I see you nodding, Angela. Yes. You two started by importing wine. You decided that you would go into business together, both of you so young, like you said. She was...
Well, youngish.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah. She, well, you said you were 25. She was in college or high school at the time?
Well, when we met, she was 16. So she was still in New Zealand. So high school years, you know, they have weird school year numbers. I don't know what that is. Anyway, but high school-ish time. But when we started our business, she was a junior. Came back to California, was at USC, and was in her junior year when we started our first business.
But you decided pretty early you wanted to go into wine. How did you know that was, I mean, you had no contacts, no history in that world, no connections.
Right. It wasn't a smart move, quite honestly. But I will say, so we both I grew up in Monterey, down the coast, and my sister grew up in New Zealand, in Marlborough, in wine country in the South Island. And so we both grew up in wine country. And her uncle, her mother's brother, was a grape grower. And so Andrea was exposed, I'll say, to grape growing at a young age. She hated it because she was, in her words, forced labor to work in the vineyards, and it was cold and it was wet and it was hard and she wasn't getting paid and she didn't want to do it. So she swore she would never do that again. So
she was an orphan.
She was. She ended up, when she moved to New Zealand at 5 years old or so, and her mother had terminal breast cancer when they moved back. And so her mom passed away shortly after that. And then she ended up in foster care in New Zealand until she came back to California to go to college. But so she had that experience in wine, hated it, swore she would never have anything to do with it ever again, but did grow up in wine country. I did not work in the vineyards as a child, but I did grow up in Monterey County, which is obviously heavily in agriculture, and wine grape growing and winemaking. And so a lot of the people around me were winemakers and came from winemaking families. And I just always thought it was really cool. And I really appreciate it. I love process. And I grew up around agriculture. So I love the idea of growing something out of the ground, processing it somehow by a magic, and making it into wine, into a bottle that you could, then get on the shelf and that you could enjoy with your friends and family. So separately, we both had those experiences. Once we met each other and started to understand what our backgrounds were like and the places where we grew up were like and how similar they are. I don't know. Have you ever been to like that area of New Zealand? Okay. Gorgeous. For those who haven't been to New Zealand, you need to go. But very similar to the central coast of California, just in terms of the coast, obviously, but the terrain, the agriculture, everything. So to us, it was sort of like, that's there are no such thing as coincidences, but we were like, what are the chances that we both grew up separately, independently, in these two places that are so very similar, and we both have touched, wine and winemaking and grape growing in some way. We find out about each other. We meet when she comes back and goes to USC in Southern California. We ended up spending time, not intentionally necessarily, but in wine country in the Central Coast. Because if you've ever like driven from Monterey to LA. There's not a whole lot there. So when we would meet halfway, we would meet in, tasting rooms and in wine country. And in a couple of short years, I guess, the universe had to hit us over the head maybe 400 times to put the idea in our minds. It's like, well, maybe there's something here for us in wine. And once we really started kind of as a joke, but once we started kind of talking about it, just ideating, being creative around the idea, we were like, why not? Why not us? There's a lot of reasons why not, because we didn't know anything about like starting a wine business, but that's kind of what led to us coming up with the idea and taking the leap to start our first business.
You also had no investors or outside capital. How did you fund the business?
So we also had no idea what we were doing, but what I found out, so
Left that part out.
yeah, no idea what we were doing. But I had been professionally in another industry and involved in importing and exporting of goods inside or in and out of the country. So I felt like logistically I could figure out how to get anything into the States. And so we talked about being importers and bringing over just some really small productions from the family-owned wineries around where my sister grew up in New Zealand. And to do so, to start that, it was the cheapest way we could figure out how to get into the wine industry, because we did not have money. And it was $1,895 to get the permitting that we needed, the licenses that we needed to be permitted to import wine into California. So that was everything that we had. And so that's where we started. And so from that point, bringing over the wines, literally hand selling them, like knocking, going door to door. Again, we didn't know what we were doing. So if there's any restaurateurs here or on-premise folks, you'll laugh. But we didn't know that there was a way you're supposed to do things. So we would literally just like walk into restaurants during service hours with our bottle in our hand, like, hey, can we taste you on this? And we got yelled at a lot. But we learned, but we were remembered. We did learn the ways, but we did start out very naively with very little money. And we learned as we went along. We figured it out as we went.
Naivete can be a gift, as a lot of you know.
It is a gift,
You might not realize it at the time, but when you look back, you know that. You said something very interesting on a podcast called She Pivots. I listened to all your podcasts.
Oh, yes. Oh,
yeah.
Do you?
You said you said you've gone through 5, 6, or 7, even 7 different iterations of your business. I thought a lot of us could relate to that.
Yeah.
We talked about this a little bit with Tanya and knowing when it's time for change and tough decisions. So I was curious, I don't know what you want to call them, pivots, iterations.
Yeah.
Did those pivots happen naturally, or was it the result of you and Andrea deciding it was time and it was time for change?
Well, we pivot when we recognize the need, but the need erupts spontaneously, I think. So like we have, it's something that we didn't know and couldn't have known probably, just how much of a roller coaster it is having a wine company producing wines in 2 different countries, dealing with market conditions and things that are going on. Obviously, nobody knows that we're, going to have a pandemic or we're going to have, economic collapse like we did 15 years ago or so, or, what's going on right now with the shift in consumers. And it does. It feels like we have a good, 2 or 3 years and something completely changes. In the industry or in the business and requires us to adjust accordingly. So we've gotten very good at adjusting accordingly. But it is every few years. And that's something that I think we didn't anticipate at all, because I think from the outside looking in, you look at wine as this, very stable, sort of rich, history of a business that, you harvest the grapes every year and you make the wine and you sell the wine. But so many things affect it from a business perspective that are outside of your control that do in fact require you to shift. I don't know why everybody says, I hate the word pivot. So now I feel like I say I hate the word pivot. I don't think I hate the word pivot, but maybe shift is a better word. We're called upon to do so, right?
Can you give us an example of one of the shifts, pivots, iterations?
Yeah, there's so many. I think the pandemic is a really great example. For us, we had built our business by 2020, we had 3 brands. We have McBride Sisters Collection Wines, we have Black Girl Magic Wines, and we have She Can Wines. Our business had grown from the time that we went into national distribution, which was maybe 2012-ish, had grown to be very, very heavily weighted in off-premise and in national accounts retail nationally, which isn't a good idea to be too heavily weighted anywhere and in any segment, right? And so when we have something like the pandemic that occurred and nobody knew, do stores stay open, do restaurants stay open, do trucks operate, all of the things. And a lot of people in our industry had to make the same adjustment and shift too, right? It was like, how are we engaging virtually? How are we engaging online? How are we engaging directly with our consumers? Which we have a wine club and we have, different ways, but we really leaned into direct engagement with consumers for two reasons. One, so that we would continue to exist as a wine company, but also how we could be helpful and engage with folks during a time that was just really, really difficult and nobody really knew what to do. So we're like, well, what can we do to make things a little bit better? We can be entertaining and ship wine to people, right? So that's what we did. But that helped for us to start to diversify our distribution, which was so primarily weighted in one segment, which is, like I said, never a good thing. So that, from 2020, 2021 and on helped us to start to shift our strategy and start to shift with where our wines are available across the country and distribution.
Today, the stated mission of McBride Sisters is to transform the industry. Just that. It's right on the first page.
That's it,
of your website.
Period.
When did that become your mission and why?
Oh, yeah.
Were you and Andrea talking about this?
Yeah.
Early on?
We were, early on. So, not unsurprisingly, as young women, when we were meeting in between Los Angeles and Monterey and we were in tasting rooms, we were comfortable in the space of wine country and the world of wine. However, we were still sort of outsiders, right? We were sort of treated as outsiders. We weren't really received as valuable customers and consumers. And that's one of the things that made us want to become a part of the industry to help advance, where we saw the industry needed to go from the inside. So yes, that's always been a part of our purpose and our mission for being here. And it remains so, throughout. It's so crazy. I was just talking yesterday and I can't believe it. It's going to be 20 years since we started our company, which is wild to me because it feels like it was last month. But 20 years ago, what attracted us to the industry, what brought us in, what our mission was, still holds true today. And I think also, the industry today is going through another shift and evolution too, with recognizing who the customer is and who the consumers are and how we engage and interact and recruit new wine drinkers, and which is critical now just for the longevity of everybody who wants to, remain sustainably in this space. And that's another shift that we have done. That's why I said youngish when we started. I'm like 50 plus now, which is weird. But we were the young kids, and initially the new kids on the block when we first started in. But it's more important now, I think, even than when we realized its importance, that we are really collectively doing the work to make sure that newer and younger drinkers feel welcomed and can see themselves engaging with wine as a beverage, as a product, but also just in the culture around wine, right? We love it. We understand how rich and, how much we love it, but we have to make it a place that's welcoming and engaging for new folks to come in. And at the very least, doesn't put them off. And that's one of the things that we've done too. I have a partner here, a founder, Jess Drewy, who's a Gen Z founder of Whiny Baby Wines, which is a brand that's new to market that me and my sister collaborated with her on in a joint venture to bring her brand, which she started during the pandemic, to international distribution, and help to give her the platform as well to tell her story as being a Gen Z founder who loves wine and wants to bring more people from her generation and demographic into wine, which is, she's very different than the McBride sisters, of course, but we all understand and recognize the importance of the work that she's doing as well to help bring wine into a new generation.
Jen, want to give a wave so folks know who
yes,
you are?
Please.
And that's WHINY.
Whiny.
Yes, you want to look it up later.
Because she said that Gen Z, right, is known as the whiniest generation.
Those weren't your words.
No, she says it. Yeah.
You also, another way you are bringing your mission, making it happen, is through the She Can Fund. And I know you're very proud of that. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started the McBride Sisters She Can Professional Development Fund when we created our wines in can called She Can. I laugh because like duh, but they're called She Can. And we launched that in 2019. We launched the fund along with it. And up to that point, me and my sister, we're always very available to any women and young people in the industry who want to ask us questions or kind of have unofficial mentorships with. But we're getting a little short on time. So we thought it would be better if we created, something organized where we could connect with and provide assistance to women, initially women in wine and spirits. That's with scholarships, mentorships, grants, and technical services. And it has been one of the things that definitely fuels us to this day, but we recognize the importance and the need for the industry and also for women in adjacent fields. So we've expanded over the years from specifically women who are already in wine and spirits to women in hospitality. We also did grants for Black women entrepreneurs. And we kind of take, we kind of assess what's going on in the world and then figure out what the focus of the fund is going to be that year. But I think now we have somewhere around 3,000 plus women who have been engaged with the fund in some way, either through grant scholarships or mentorships. And we have great partners like Meta and financial institutions who help fund the efforts. And it's become, this growing, robust community of women.
That's fantastic. How can folks learn more about it?
She Can Fund. Well, on our website, we have McBrideSisters.com, but we have She Can Fund. What is it? .org. That's my daughter. Yeah. .org. And we open up scholarships on every year, or we announce every year on International Women's Day on March 8th. What the focus is going to be for the year, and when we're going to open up applications for grants or scholarships, and then we take it from there.
Mark your calendars and help spread the word.
Yeah.
I know you are very excited about this project, but M Ranch Estate, some of you will know what that is in this room.
So yeah, M Ranch. So for all of these years, we've kind of been a winery without a home, right? We started importing wines from New Zealand. The first wines that we made were also in New Zealand, but with a partner winery in New Zealand. We started making wines in the Central Coast of California. And so last year we purchased a small property in Carneros in Napa. And we got the key. I say nothing, there's no coincidences, right? But it was already named M Ranch for one. And so like McBride, M Ranch, we were like, when we visited the property, we're like, that's a sign. We purchased the property. We got the keys on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And we were like, took the keys in our hand. We were like, I have a dream. And so it's the first time that we really, truly have a home for the McBride sisters and for all of our efforts in wine. And it's funny because we never thought we would purchase a property in Napa because we make our wines not in Napa historically. We're down the Central Coast in San Luis Obispo and Paso and Monterey and New Zealand. But it just felt so right. We live in the Bay Area. I live in the East Bay and my sister lives in San Francisco. So it felt so right and everything has come together. And it's a milestone for us to be able to have a property. And sorry, I'm talking about it's a vineyard. It's maybe, 5 or 6 acres of Chardonnay and Carneros. But it's also a historic family home. It's a 100-year-old property. It's kind of like a resort. It's got multiple buildings. They had horses, pools, and tennis courts and all of those things. But it's important for us as a family, as a business, to have that home, to have it accessible to ourselves, but also to our friends and community in the East Bay and in wine country to be able to come and visit us. And we think it's important for wine as an industry and for Napa also to, have us present, and we have been very much welcomed into the area, but it's the next chapter for us. So it's going to be a big renovation project. I said problem already. It's a problem. hopefully, if I play my cards right, wherever Brene is, if I play my cards right, she'll help us with the planting project for the future on the site. But we're just getting ready to dig in and get started on what's probably going to be a couple years of work. But we look forward to welcoming people.
Absolutely. We look forward to coming back. Congratulations on that. I know
Thank you.
20 years is a huge milestone. And that's the M Ranch estate is also a big milestone. For those of you who are here for the first session, you might have heard Jen Pelka from Unfem Wines talk about setting goals. And I was curious, a big goal of yours? Maybe wine in the White House, like Jen? Are you working on that?
Yeah, I would love that as well.
You took a partner on
we can
that.
hold hands and make that happen. Yeah, I think for us, kind of our next set of goals is really to go global, to become more global. It was an initiative and a strategy of ours prior to the pandemic to expand our distribution outside of the U.S. And then the pandemic happened, and then we spent the next 3 years trying to make enough wine to provide, domestically. And so now we are back to having our eyes set on what other places may be good markets, for Olive or one of our brands. And so we've just started exporting a little bit to Canada, to the Caribbean islands. Just came back from a trip to the continent, to Nigeria, looking at some African exports. But I think that's kind of the next frontier for us. We've done all of the work here in the States, and we want to, bring these wines and this message to across the world. That's all, just global domination, nothing big.
I have no doubt you're going to get there. So, okay, my last question for you, same as with Tanya. Tanya, your motto or your mantra, where's Tanya? Was it ease and grace? Grace and ease. So Tanya's were grace and ease. What is a motto or mantra that gets you through the day?
That's a good one, Tanya. I don't know that I have a mantra necessarily, but I think for myself, I constantly am reminding myself of perspective. So I'm a very visual person in my mind, right? So I have to remind myself not to internalize and take things so seriously at times. I wish I had a 2-word answer. I don't. I'm sorry. But remembering that we are on literally a, rock hurling through space that's chasing a fiery ball of gas. And to put things in perspective, because, and I think particularly as women in business, mothers, we put so much pressure on ourselves unnecessarily, and it doesn't do us any good, right? So it's when I start really feeling all of the pressure, I start having a difficult time with something, it really helps me just to put things in perspective. We're flinging through the universe at the moment. So I'm sure I can figure out how to, I'm double booked at 11 o'clock. I'm sure I can figure that out. It'll be fine, and for me personally, that really helps me out. But I think it's a good message for all of us to share with each other too, is, to alleviate some of the self-imposed pressure that we put on ourselves and have some faith that if we're working in the right direction, we will figure it out and everything will be fine.
So think about the universe and take a breath.
Yes.
Well, Robin, thank you so much. It's been an honor getting to know you better.
Thank you so much.